Hello everybody, thanks David. I don't think David's quite right about the prospectus comment how everyone's changed a lot, because David's like one of those ageless people. If you look at him, if you look at the photo back from 20 years ago, it looks about the same today, I reckon.
Plastic surgery.
Last time I was here at Evelyn Page was to open the new bowling green out there actually, which looks superb. We sort of, when we built it a bit short, so we had to sort of fix it up, and the village residents were delighted with the change. If there's any bowling, or actually Tony Rickaby, who's one of the big stalwarts of the bowling community here, it rolls pretty well now, doesn't it?
Very well.
Yeah, that's good. So delighted to be here today at Evelyn Page. It's really the first village where I got my full sense of a Ryman development from start to finish. I joined in January 2007, and in about my first week actually, Kevin Hickman and Simon Challies and I came up and we had a look at the site that we'd just acquired here. We hadn't paid for it yet, but we were having a look around, and Carmel Fisher came up as well. Some of you might remember Carmel was one of the founders of Fisher Funds, and she was interested to see it. And you could just tell standing on the site that it'd be a beautiful village. And of course it was the first sort of experience of seeing the vision of our development and design people to take a bare piece of land and then create this sort of what is a really beautiful setting for today. So it was a big purchase for us back then. We actually paid 20 million for this land back in 2007. So it was a very big purchase, and we were able to afford it because of our business model of recycling capital. So the settlement for the land was going to be in June that year, and that was exactly the same time as a whole bunch of independent apartments were being settled and moved in on at Edmund Hillary in our first stage of apartments there. And I remember I was on holiday in Mooloolaba with my family, counting the cash in from Edmund Hillary as the payment was made for the land here. So that sort of model of recycling capital and being able to work across multiple sites at once has stood with us through to today. There were a number of battles along the way. Getting consent wasn't easy, and we're also hit by the global financial crisis, or the GFC, partway through. So in 2007, if you think about the sort of history, in 2007 investment bankers would come and see me regularly, and they would say that we should do a share buyback. That was their big idea in 2007, and that we should gear up the balance sheet significantly, because we had a lazy balance sheet apparently, and we should buy our own shares back on the market. But we didn't do that, and by 2008 they were telling us that we should do some acquisition of other companies on the market, and then by 2009, by the time the GFC hit, they were telling us that we should do a capital raise. And I said to them, well, we don't need to do a capital raising because we didn't do the ideas from 2007 and 2008. So that was a good position to be in. We also spent a lot of time, we've got a good reputation here in New Zealand now, a really strong reputation, but I actually personally spent a lot of time up here on the North Shore during 08 and 09 talking to local lawyers in the North Shore in Auckland, because people didn't really know particularly who Ryman was. And there was a lot of developers who were struggling. There was a Knightsbridge development, I think, up here, which some of you might be aware of, that was in receivership, I think, at the time. And lawyers who were sort of signing off on their client contracts, they were worried about things like whether we would be able to build this community centre, or whether we would complete the ongoing build of the village. So all those sort of battles that sometimes you take for granted today, we never lose sight of the fact of our heritage of having to sort of fight for our brand and build our reputation. And in fact, an Auckland fund manager told me at about the same time that this would be the very last Auckland development we would do, because we would never be able to find any more land in Auckland. But we've been able to find a couple of things along the way. He also said that we'd never be able to sell Evelyn Page down in 2009 and 2010 because of the property market, but again we were able to sell it down really well. And Tony, you were here on the ground at the time, and thank you for the huge amount of work you did during that time, and the team. So the construction team faced a number of challenges, and the village actually set a Ryman record for our largest single concrete pour. Still sort of urban legend in the company. It was the largest pour in Auckland since the Sky Tower, and in fact it was bigger than the Sky Tower pour, I think. And we haven't stood still since we opened. We've expanded the village centre, we've put in emergency generators and a never alone system for residents. We've retrofitted air conditioning. Sorry that we didn't do that in the first place. And we've just recently extended the bowling green as well. So we just look to keep villages up to date and invest in them and make sure that we meet the needs of what we're learning as we go. So there's been some true Ryman stars at this village along for the ride, and whilst this isn't a sort of a group comment, it's interesting to get down to a village level to understand how our people development works. So Matt Hutchison was the project manager. He was responsible for building the village, and then he went on to build Burt Sutcliffe and Birkenhead. Today he's a regional construction manager overseeing our William Sanders and Murray Halberg builds. Paul Sutton did a great job of getting this village started up and running as a village manager, and he's now over in Melbourne as our Victorian operations manager. And Lynn Charlton, she was a village manager here too. She did a magnificent job, and then in fact in 2018 won Village Manager of the Year, and she's now doing a great job for us as a regional manager in Auckland, making sure that our newest villages run really smoothly. So you can kind of see that through the various people involved in the village over time, and that's just a snapshot, that we create career opportunities where people can progress and we provide great opportunities for our people. So really, in short, Evelyn Page has been a great success story. We were told it wouldn't work, we had to win the community over, and now it's part of the fabric of Orewa and the centre of life for our residents and also their families. The care centre here is a place of kindness, and we've got incredibly dedicated staff who work for us. I remember one afternoon I was here about 3 or 4 months ago. There's a lady who visits 8 rest homes and hospitals around the Orewa Red Beach area, and she's been doing that for 10 years. And she came and got me and said to me, "I just want to talk to you about your staff because they're incredible." And to the extent that when her mother needed care, there was no question for her that her mum would come into the special care unit here at Evelyn Page, having seen all the other care facilities. So it was a great message to me that the staff do an incredible job, and we do the right things. So in relation to that, people are our scarcest resource. So looking after our people and making sure that we're developing our next generation of leaders who share our values, they're kind of things that I obsess about, really. And as David mentioned, we're a care company, and a big focus for us in the past 2 years is making sure that the regard that we have for our team is recognised in their pay. We've just increased pay again, and the Ryman adult entry age for our villages is now $20 an hour, which is $2.30 above the minimum wage. In addition, we've also had increases for our caregivers as part of the government's equal pay settlement, and last year we increased nurses' base pay to align with the DHB settlement, and we were one of the few people in the aged care sector to do that. So what it means is that we've now lifted our median hourly rate by 33% for our registered nurses and for our caregivers over the past 2 years. So our formula for success is simple, really. It's about happiness. So having happy residents and happy staff members means that shareholders should do well. Our surveys show that, and overall our residents and our team are actually happier than ever. In fact, our last staff survey results showed an increase in engagement of 50%. It's a great endorsement, but we are by no means complacent, and when we look at these surveys and stuff, we really focus on what are the frustrations and things that we need to do better. We've also invested heavily in people development and in training, and also in apprenticeships, particularly in construction, and in identifying our leaders of tomorrow and making sure that they have a really clear future career path with us where they can really meet their potential. And if you think about the stories of Matt and Paul and Lynn and people like that, they've had wonderful career opportunities with us, and often opportunities that perhaps you wouldn't be able to get anywhere else. We're also developing the Ryman Academy to ensure that our leaders get a world-class education, primarily through our LEAP development program and through an advanced leadership program with the Melbourne Business School. So we've got great people, but we're going to need plenty more. We hope to double the size of the business roughly every 5 years, and so finding more great people that share our values is a key part of what we're focusing on. David talked about the demographics that underpinned Kevin John's thinking 20 years ago. And it's really interesting that the demographic change has not actually started yet for us. The first baby boomers, based on our average age of entry, won't really arrive at our villages until 2025, that's in 6 years' time. And then that demographic growth continues for 4 decades. It's the most unprecedented change in human history. So that's what's at the heart, and so what we need to do is we need to plan to do things differently and better over time. And that's at the heart of things like Project Delight, which is focused on improvements to the experience of independent residents, and also our digital first strategy, where we're rolling out more technology at villages. So, for example, for the first time we've appointed a customer experience role who is an ex-highly successful village manager, so we're really focused on the resident experience. We've also made great progress in raising the standard of our care even higher. 84% of our New Zealand villages now have 4-year accreditation from the Ministry of Health, which is really the gold standard of care. The average for our competitors, as you see on the graph there, is 40% for larger operators. On the development front, we've just received consent for our Hobsonville site, which is our newest in Auckland. So well done to the development team, and we're hoping to get started on that, just probably in about sort of 6 months' time or so. Also hot off the press, we've received Overseas Investment Office approval for our new Riccarton Park site in Christchurch, and the Overseas Investment Office has also granted us a standing consent to purchase 500 hectares of non-sensitive residential land at 20 sites over the next 3 years in New Zealand if those sort of opportunities arise. This means we can purchase land without requiring individual approvals, which is a significant achievement by the team. So all going well with consents and development applications, we are targeting to have work underway on 12 sites in the coming year, and we're about to move into our biggest ever build program. In total, we have 20 villages in our land bank with more than 7,000 beds and units to develop. That's the equivalent of 65% of our current portfolio. So we have an extraordinary platform to meet the demand that we see ahead, and we'll just keep on adding to the land bank as opportunities arise. We've got some great opportunities we're looking at right now in New Zealand and Victoria to add to that. I'd just like to let you know that our Chief Operations Officer, Barbara Rain-Rose, that's her there, with Albie, who won the first Kevin Hickman Award actually at our awards this year, did a fantastic recognition for his job actually. So Barbara has signalled her intention to retire later this year. Barb has made an incredible contribution to Ryman for more than 26 years. She has overseen the setup of 31 care centres, been responsible for thousands of staff, and all of our clinical care for all of those years. She has installed the importance of offering the very highest standards of care into her team, and they will carry on that mantle because that's the culture that we've built over that time. So she's decided that the time has come to spend more time with her husband Laurie, her cocker spaniel Harry, and her grandchildren, and we wish her all the best. So I'd like to recognise her, please. And in fact, Barb would have been here today, but she's actually got the flu, ironically, being involved in care, and she can't join us. But Barb, if you're watching, we acknowledge your amazing contribution, and I'm sure the shareholders would have loved to have shaken your hand at the end of today. Hope you're well. So we'll be recruiting a new Chief Operations Officer as soon as we can. I'd like to introduce you to the rest of the senior team. So Dave Bennett is our Chief Financial Officer. He's up here there with me. He's much better than the last CFO. That's what I always say. It's really true too. He's very, very tall as well. Stand up, Dave. Look how tall he is. Yeah. Yeah. He does, yeah. I actually try and avoid arguments. Yeah. Yeah. We've got Debbie MacLeod, who's our Chief Sales and Marketing Officer. Debbie, where are you? Here she is. Hello, there she is. A lot of you probably recognise her. So Debbie has done a 27-year tour of duty for Ryman. Isn't that incredible? And so every year end and every half year when we count the sales in, Debbie's counting them in one by one with huge dedication across her team. And she also has been instrumental in Melbourne. You've been living there for 5 years, Debbie? Been living there for 5 years, so it's been played a really big part in spearheading our operations on the ground there. And also got Tom Brownrigg. Where's Tom? Here he is. Here's Tom. So Tom's our Chief Construction Officer. He's our builder. He's been with us for 13 years, and it's amazing when you think of sites. When they're at their peak, when they're at their most busiest, you'd have, say, 400 to 500 people on site per day across a number of different sites. We're hoping to build across 12 different sites this year, and it's a huge responsibility, and we're really grateful for the work that you do, Tom, and overseeing that work. And it's not, Auckland's certainly not the easiest market at the moment to work in, and requires a lot of dedication and hard work from the team. So thanks, Tom. Also got Nicole Forster. Where's Nicole? She's our Chief People and Technology Officer. And look, a huge part of Nicole's focus is, she's been with us for 8 years, by the way, a huge part of Nicole's focus is on the people side of things, to make sure that we've got the development and the education and the retention strategies to make sure that the culture of the company and the people that we have are just first rate, and we continue to grow our teams. And so her team and herself have been really responsible for the leadership development programs that we've been putting in place over the last couple of years. And she also has another significant portfolio, which is technology. And the technology side of things at Ryman is a lot more complex now than what it used to be a few years ago. We've got thousands of tablet devices installed in resident aged care rooms. We really focused on our digital strategy, and so Nicole's technology team have been doing a huge amount of work in the last couple of years, so thanks, Nicole. I'd also like to introduce to you Jeremy Moore. Where is Jeremy? So Jeremy has stepped up as our Acting Chief Development Officer, and it's great to see that already. We've seen a couple of land purchases come through, a couple of consents, some Overseas Investment Office approvals. So the team's getting off to a great start under your leadership, Jeremy, and we're really enjoying having part of you with the senior team. So the senior team will be around after the meeting, and it'd be great for you to have a chat with them, because it's really interesting to speak to people who are looking after different parts of the business. And just finally on the team, we operate a 24/7 business. Things go wrong. Sometimes it's quite serious. And so for me to know that I've got a team of people who are just completely dedicated 24/7, I think you can be pretty proud of the sort of people that represent you as shareholders as Ryman. I'd also like to thank you, our shareholders. One of our shareholders and residents, John Harwood. John, could you perhaps stand up? I know it's very embarrassing. So John and his wife Marlene, hi Marlene, were kind enough to let us feature their investment story in our annual report. So John's been as a resident here at Evelyn Page. As Chief Executive and in my previous role as CFO, when I come up here, I'd always enjoy catching up with John and getting some feedback on the ground from an investor and a resident point of view. Last time I popped in to see John, his cat was nicely asleep on his table in the lounge, and I disturbed the poor old cat and ran out the door. But it's that sort of loyalty and the positive impact it's made on your life being here at the village, and as a shareholder, it's humbling to hear that, and thank you for sharing those stories with us. But people like John tend to worry about the same things that I do. John recently asked me how Ryman was how we were going to keep growing while maintaining the same culture and philosophy. And what he said to me was, how are you going to make sure you Rymanise everybody? And that's a great way to look at it. How are we going to make sure we Rymanise everyone? And I think that the answer really lies in our prospectus that David mentioned from 20 years ago. And really our story has remained the same. Our intentions haven't altered in 20 years. So the faces may change, we'll get bigger, but the fundamentals haven't altered. And what it's really about is making sure we pass down those stories from our founders and the people who have really built this company, and share those stories with our people as they come, and make sure that they share those same values as well. So I guess, we're in a world that is changing faster, I think, than any other time in history. Probably a lot of people might agree with that. But I think we need to really think about the things that will not change. Because some things that we want as human beings, I believe, will stay the same. And that means that the fundamentals for what we need actually won't change at all. Because at its core, human touch is not some sentimental indulgence, I don't think. It's a biological necessity. That's why what is uniquely Ryman, which I think is doing stuff right and doing things that would be good enough for your mum, is at the core of what we do. The need for beautifully built communities where people come together, the touch and laughter of a caregiver, the care of a nurse as she checks your blood pressure and holds your wrist and arm and talks about your day, the companionships of new friends and family. All of these things are things that people truly need, and I believe they will always need. So I see that Ryman can be an ever-increasing force of good in this world, and we look after older people like our very own family. We help older people to be seen with respect and dignity by society. We create jobs and lifetime careers that are filled with purpose and with meaning. We do new things and we get some of them wrong, because the doing new things is actually hard. We develop our people to be the very best they can be and to do what is good enough for your mum, your very own family. And I believe that if we do those things right, then success will follow for all of us as residents, as staff and as shareholders. Thank you very much. Back to David.